with your drawing, you have the choice of doing obviously the cross-hatching with pen, ink, and watercolor, or using charcoal on the bogus paper. I always think one of the best ways to practice is just shading a sphere, just like we would practice shading any of our three-dimensional forms. So I'm going to go over each one, and then you guys can practice whatever one you plan on using, okay? So with the sphere, obviously as we start with our circle shape, when we are doing cross-hatching is simply using lines to create value. The difference is the farther away the lines are, the lighter the value. The more concentrated the lines are, the darker the value. That's the most basic description I can give you. Fun thing about cross-hatching is your lines can be directional, which also helps you to create texture and depth. So for example, here I'm doing a cross-hatching of just vertical lines, okay? However, you will often see cross-hatching where the lines cross over each other, thus the name cross-hatching. Okay, so you can use either technique, whichever one makes more sense to you. Maybe you're trying to make it look like a fence or like a highly textured area. So maybe you want your lines to go diagonal. Or perhaps you want them to be all vertical because you want it to look more like water or something like that. I enjoy cross-hatching. It is tedious. So you can see I've started to build up a darker value. I have some medium values starting to get a light value. When you are cross-hatching over a form, so for example a sphere, your cross-hatching needs to wrap around the form. So just the same way when you were shading with a pencil, your shadow needs to bend to go along with the form. Your line needs to bend as well. Okay, so you can see in order to make this look round, I'm not only going to use lines, but I'm also going to use lines that are curving to help enhance the round feeling of the sphere. So I'm just pressing really light with a pen. You can vary pressure with cross-hatching as well, but it's not the only way. Just going to say my light source is up here in the upper left. You want to pick one area as your light source when you're doing a sphere shading. And so then what I would do is I would slowly build up my lines. And I'm sure you're like, this is going to take forever. And yeah, it kind of does. You can look in my example and see there's places where I've used cross-hatching. I love the look of cross-hatching underneath a watercolor. I think it just gives you a nice combination of hard and soft texture kind of, because the watercolor usually ends up looking kind of soft. And then you have that nice line element of the cross-hatching. So you can see I'm starting to build up the line in my shadow area and then fade it away as I go towards my light source. And I am varying pressure to help me get even a little bit more value here. Now I could leave it like this and just say, okay, yeah, this is cross-hatching. This still is. It's just I'm only using the line going one direction. I could also, however, cross the lines over top of each other. Just kind of depends on what kind of a look you want. But the basic idea of more lines equals shadow, less lines equals light or white is the general process. And this is just a regular ballpoint pen I'm using, nothing fancy. Cross-hatching can be done with any material. Most likely you're going to see it with ink, but you can also do cross-hatching with colored ink. You can also do cross-hatching with pencil. Okay, so there's the general idea of how you would shade the sphere, and then of course you have your cast shadow, and then you would really, really want to build up your line right there so that you have that nice depth of the sphere going into the cast shadow. Okay, so that's just how I would practice doing cross-hatching before you guys start your final. If you are going to be doing charcoal, same simple steps, although one thing I like about bogus paper, which is different than what you guys have done, the bogus paper has that tan color, so that becomes kind of your mid-tone. So think about it that way. Rather than having like a gray as your midtone and then you have white and then you have your dark values, you have the tan as kind of your base color, then you add white to make it light, you add black to make it dark. And that's how I try to approach it. You can use charcoal pencils or you can use charcoal sticks, whichever one you want. And again, since it's a sphere, I'm going to practice bending my shadow around the form so it looks more three-dimensional. And then we also have our blending stumps. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up. I'm really using like the side of the lead here to get a very soft touch. Almost holding my pencil like parallel to the table so I don't get such a deep scratch mark in there. Okay. Also, if you want to build up more value quicker, you have the charcoal sticks for that. You can do that too. Okay. So I have that. I'm going to go ahead and blend it. And again, this is your choice. Some people really like that gritty look that the charcoal gives you. That's fine. You don't have to use a blending stump as long as you can see your values and you're getting the depth you want. I kind of like to do a little bit of both. I don't try to make it my goal to have it be perfectly seamless. I like the grit of the charcoal, but some people like to totally blend that out. So that just depends on the person, okay? So now this would be fine as far as, you know, I have my light and I have my dark. Where you get into, where it gets a little tricky is, so now you actually have white to work into there. And I really love the contrast that white charcoal gives you. I think it's just another fun element to work with, but you do have to incorporate it somehow. And so that can be a little bit of a learning curve there. So I'm gonna really try and shape that highlight area, blend it down a little bit, use either your finger or your blending stump, and you're just gonna kind of work with both of them back and forth so you can get a nice combination of the two. I'm gonna work even a little bit of the white into my charcoal there, just to give it a little more realism, kind of blending it with my finger. I really love with the bogus paper and the charcoal that you can layer white over top of the charcoal, which is a nice way to get some depth if you want something in your city to have some interesting texture. You can use both of them back and forth to kind of build up that texture rather than having to just use a pencil. So I'm just kind of working the white into my black a little bit, continuing to try and bend my line so that it keeps wrapping around my form. Okay, so there is your demo of the two different techniques, whether you choose cross hatching or charcoal.